Welcome to Corpstruction, the podcast of the Tulsa District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. By the time the first shovels break ground on a new civil works or military construction venture, the Corps of Engineers has already devoted thousands of hours into studying, planning, designing, and contracting the project. Kalli Egan, the Regional Acquisition Program Manager at Southwestern Division, focuses on strategies and technical integration. She works with districts to improve engineering and construction activities. Kalli's a true success story and model Corps employee. She grew up between Texas and Oklahoma. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Oklahoma State University and a Master of Science in Engineering and Technology Management from OSU. Kalli's career with the Corps began in 2001. She started as a student intern and by 2015 had risen to the Deputy Chief of Engineering and Construction Division at the Tulsa District. In 2015, she left Tulsa to return to Texas and spent 2 years working in the private sector, supporting local, state, and federal projects. Thanks for joining us, Kalli.
Hey, good morning. It's good to be here.
So, wow, yeah, you were here. I guess the last time I saw you, that's been a couple years, I think, since the last time I saw you. Actually,
It
when was the last
has.
time you were in Tulsa? I mean, for work.
Nancy, for work. I was going to say Nancy Crenshaw's retirement ceremony.
Okay.
I made the trip back there.
Yeah. When you left, you spent those 2 years in the private sector. Did you feel a like a calling to return? Was it or what made you decide to return to the Corps?
Well, in 2015, probably one of the hardest decisions I made was to leave the district. My husband's company was relocating him to Houston, and so it was one of those family life decisions that we had to make. So that's the decision that led me to leave the Corps and go into private industry. And it was a really good experience. I learned a lot, but then I also went through Hurricane Harvey, and was sitting there at my table working during that time, watching the Corps of Engineers on the news. They were flood fighting. They were responding to that event, and not too long after that, the governor's report came out of the post-Hurricane Harvey projects for the state. And at the bottom of every one of those projects, it said the Corps of Engineers, the Corps of Engineers, the Corps of Engineers. And it just, I wanted to be a part of that. I missed the Corps, and it just gave me the opportunity to come back and be part of that program.
So while you were seeing that on the news, did you ever do any deployments while you were for like power team or anything or the emergency management stuff?
I didn't because my kids were little. I was always the one that stayed back and took on the additional work to cover for the people deployed.
Yeah, that's very important because when people are downrange, it is so important to have people who are there like giving you the support you need. That's definitely true. What skills from the private sector do you think you gained, or what experience? What was most beneficial about that?
So, from just a fundamental engineering skills, it's pretty comparable between the core and private industry. But I did. There were a few things. The first thing is, coming from the core to private industry, I didn't have the awareness of just some of the software platforms that private industry uses to work across geographic boundaries, even companies that allow them to collaborate during production, and got to see a lot of their quality management processes and have some insight there. The other thing I learned was the business development side and how they form teaming arrangements, what motivates them to go after government contracts, what frustrates them to go after government contracts, and got to play in that, got to be the one, responding to these government opportunities and see, some of that. And the third thing, and it really wasn't a skill, but it does impact how I operate today, was I got to see how they perceive us. And, I had one person tell me, and it was a few months after I started, they said, hey, you've really transitioned pretty easily from government to private sector. I'm surprised. And I didn't know whether to take that as a compliment or be a little bit offended. But there's just perception, and perception is reality. So even today, how I engage with industry is really just to open up that curtain a little bit more, let them see some of the things that we're doing, or the progress or the hurdles we're trying to overcome, so that they can see, because the pace and the pressure and the stress, they're very similar, but I let them see that a little bit more than maybe I used to.
Is is there something specifically that they tend to have a problem with in terms of bidding for contracts, or working with us? Sorry, or working with us, that we are trying to fix for them, that you're aware of?
Well, for them, I think for us, there's this huge administrative burden of just the process, and there's checks and balances. There's regulations out there we have to follow. There's a lot of eyes on things, especially when we're trying to do things a little bit different, and it can slow things down. And so, from their perspective, when they don't hear anything, that's the biggest frustration from them, because they're trying to formulate their teams. It may be a small business set aside, it may be a woman owned set aside, it may be unrestricted. We may be doing one, we may be doing three. So, how many opportunities there may be for them to team increases their probability of win, because it's a go no go decision. It's an investment they're making based upon a business decision of their probability of success. And so the more we can communicate with them to give them insight into that, the more advance notice we give them to develop those teams and be ready to respond.
So, well, we talked about you talked about why you decided to can't come back. Um, what's the main project you're working on now, and what's the biggest challenge associated with it?
So I'd mentioned that I came back to the Corps because I wanted to work supplemental, and I did for 3 years, more from the regional side, where I'm supporting the districts and various needs. But last year I had the opportunity to spend most of the year in a detail working directly for the Galveston district commander, and got to reassess the program management office and the structure of that, and the leadership there, and to reorganize how we were managing that program. The second side of that was that I had the chance to also just challenge the way we were planning to deliver the program. And one project in particular, brand new 26-27 mile levee and flood wall system, a lot of risk. And the feedback we were getting from industry was, hey, you guys operate in this lump sum firm fixed price environment where you put all the risk on construction. You need to start, you know, figuring out ways to better share the risk. And when you look at private industry and some of their big infrastructure programs, they have different arrangements that are different from how we've traditionally delivered our projects. And so we reformulated one of our delivery strategies, and the district is actually on the cutting edge of core civil works, that maybe it would be the model or the template for other teams across the enterprise to consider. And now that I'm back at the region, taking that even to a broader view of not just construction, not just civil works, but also one, our architect engineering contracts for those large projects that between 0 and 35% design, they're evolving. The requirements aren't black and white or clear, where we can just articulate this perfect scope that's not going to change on day two. So even bringing in some of those different ways of delivering and incentivizing the engineering contracts, and then also even across all of our programs, including military construction, different ways that we can deal with some of the market volatility that we're even seeing today, so that we're keeping industry interest into pursuing these opportunities and providing proposals.
Are are you noticing with the industry, with the market, the way things are changing, with products being not necessarily as available as they normally would be, has that put a burden on contractors that you've noticed?
Oh yeah, yeah, and we're trying to do, um, what we can. If there's a way that we can separate out a material item and go ahead and say purchase, what you're going to need for this next year. We're also looking at, a more liberal use of the economic price adjustment contractual clause, where if there is something like structural steel or something that we can tie to a cost index, maybe that would take some of that risk off the contractors, where they're not scared away. And my other concern too is even small businesses that have contracts with us right now. Well, gas is, they can't absorb a buck 50 extra in gas right now, and we're not in the business to put businesses out of business. So it's just going to require us to think differently, and hopefully things settle down sooner rather than later.
I spoke with someone who used to work for you when you were here, and they said the thing about Callie is that she's really good at translating concerns that engineers and technical people have into understandable language for the customers, um, and communicating that well. Has anyone ever told you that you worked with here at the Corps, or maybe even in private sector?
Not that directly. What I was always get was, hey, you're, you know, kind of an atypical engineer. And I think a lot of that, I've had one foot on the technical side and one foot on more of the project and program management side, because I really enjoy the strategy. And I know I drive our engineers crazy, but in a lot of these projects are complex. It's not easy. That's why they need us. That's why we need industry. And sometimes you just got to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. If there's a problem, what actions do we take to get to a solution? If there's a risk, what's the potential impact, and how do we prepare for that? It reminds me of an example that I ran into late last year, where tons of utilities were impacting this project, tons of them, and the team in-house and our engineering contractor, they were just getting wrapped around who was responsible for these utilities. Whose job was it to figure out what needed to be done on these utilities? And I said, time out. Let's get around the table, eyeball to eyeball, and let's look at these issues. What is the best engineering solution? Let's not worry about who's in charge, but what's the engineering solution? And we were dealing with stuff like, there was a manhole that was within 2 feet of our ideal easement. It's like, well, does it make sense to move this manhole 2 feet, or is it better to request a variance? And so once we kind of went through and triaged those issues, then the solution, it was pretty easy to get to and understand whose responsibility it was, and it really clarified, just the whole issue and how to move forward. So that's how I like to look at things, is really just not only inside, but also taking a step back and trying to look at it from all sides.
Yeah, how do you balance that between doing because obviously if something takes less, if there's a cost, or whether it's administrative cost of having to get something approved where it goes through a process, or if it's a financial cost where you're going to have to spend more money to do something, where does that balance? How do you determine that return on investment for I mean, are you doing the math in terms of, well, labor wise, it's going to cost this much time to have an engineer put together a request, and then that takes her off the job, or we might have to spend this much to move some dirt somewhere else, So how do you make that determination?
It is a tricky balance. It's a tricky balance of, total cost of the project, because there's certain, one design condition could just drive your cost. Um, and then also, what's the return on investment? If we stop and spend this much time to maybe rethink it, what's the potential payoff in the end? Knowing that too, if we spend too much time up front, construction inflation, may kick us on the back end. So it's just this delicate balance where every situation is a little bit different. The risks are different. But the magic is just in the discussion with the team and hearing all sides of thought, and just going with what we feel like is the best approach after consideration of all those elements.
When we were talking about communicating um, communicating in a way that the customer can understand, or that um, maybe people associated with the project can best understand, our stakeholders. How do you develop that skill, or do you think it's something that can be developed, or do you think it's something that just some people are more natural at it? What's your take on that?
Oh, I absolutely think it can be developed. I think it takes um, just being able to see the strategy and just remember, we're here to deliver projects, and they're not easy. And my favorite part of the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, is in the very first chapter, and it says, the absence of direction, the team should take as the ability to innovate and use good business judgment. If it's not prohibited by law or regulation or executive order, that we have, the ability to think differently. So, it's just an aspect of critical thinking where, yeah, I may have done it this way the last 20 years, but that doesn't mean I need to spend the next 20 years doing it that way and challenge even my own personal bias or the assumptions I'm walking into. And let the team feel comfortable too with challenging each other. So I think it's just developing that comfort where it's, yeah, 2 plus 2 needs to equal 4, but there just may be different ways to get there.
When you were the deputy chief of ENC, you did a lot of the groundwork in terms of standing up the Dam Safety Production Center. What was involved with that process? And you spent some time as the interim director, right? What was
I did,
involved in all
yeah.
that?
Well, so the Corps of Engineers, across the enterprise, across their inventory of existing dams, had updated the risk assessments and the budgets that uh, were needed as part of that investment to reduce the risk of those structures and what their intended purpose was. And so there was an investment strategy. And that way we as the Corps could say, here's what our priority is, as far as that investment. And then also to Congress to say, if we get $500 million a year, here's what we can do. If we get $1 billion a year, here's what we can do. But when those projects were prioritized, what it did was it it had like a geographic disparity between where the focus of those projects might be for the first 5 years, and then 25 years into the future. So 43 districts across the Corps of Engineers can't maintain competency to do dam safety projects if they have a project 1 year and another project 10 years later. So a task came out from headquarters that caused us to look at that and assess, how do we need to be structured in the future. And for Southwestern Division, we regionalized that group, and we basically took all of the people across our region that were working these large dam safety projects and put them under the umbrella of the Dam Safety Production Center. And what that allowed us to do was we had our subject matter experts, but then also continue the pipeline of new and younger engineers that are able to develop themselves to be a future subject matter expert, which is more of a sustainable model. That was 11 years ago. It's still in existence today. I mentioned the detail I had down in Galveston District on the supplemental program. We are using those resources out of that Dam Safety Production Center, even on these levee projects, because dams have soil and concrete and mechanical components. Well, so do levees and flood walls and pump stations. So the skill set is pretty similar, and they're an asset not only to our region, but also across the Corps.
Did Now you did a lot of the organizational structure for that too, right? You were responsible for kind of setting that up or providing the recommendations on how it should be set up to the commander at the time.
Right. I was working really for two districts, having to keep the other two districts informed, but it was really for also division. So from a career perspective, seeing how the process goes to set up a new organization that's across the region was very, from just an understanding. I was able to lead that and work it through the process. But then also even just briefing leadership. It was my first opportunity to brief senior leadership, even after the up to the regional level. And then two, just BlackBerry friendly weekly status reports that just kept them in the loop, because they're busy too, so that they could see the progress that was being made, or the challenges that we were having. But yes, from an administration perspective, got to set up an interim um, an interim structure, a final structure, a transition plan, workload, workforce, new positions. It was all of the things um, kind of under one initiative.
Now you taking resources, you said you're taking resources from two districts and sort of merging them for DSPC.
Hmm.
What,
It
how do you,
was
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, it was Tulsa District and Little Rock District were the predominance of the resources, but that didn't negate the fact that some of the other districts had strong skill sets that supported it. So even though most came from those two districts, it was really a regional group.
Was was that a delicate process because you're dealing where people are, I don't want to say commanders are losing resources, but they're going to division and you're pulling resources from two districts and other districts as well to move to to move to a division level. Did you have to walk sort of a fine line in making sure that all the commanders' concerns were addressed, so district commanders didn't feel like they were missing out? Or
It was a delicate balance, and it took, we just went down there and we talked through uh, the plan, and listen to the concerns and address the concerns where we could. But bottom line, the competency and the sustainability of an organization that had enough work to develop, that new talent, that was the priority. And everybody knew that. It was really just making sure that, somebody that had an interest in being part of that we didn't miss them.
so that vision was, it was already, there was a lot of buy-in already with that vision before that process even started, right?
Yes.
Gotcha. What um did you have a mentor early on in your career, and who was it?
I I did. Sandy Egan, and no relation. Um, she she was a technical manager in the military design group. And when I was an intern, she took me under her wing, and we traveled across the country on the training barracks standardization program. Um, and then, too, she was the technical manager over a lot of just military construction projects at Fort Sill, at Tinker Air Force Base. And I got to watch her not only go through just the engineering contracting process and negotiate those contracts, but then also how she managed the design, how she partnered with these engineering companies. They'd run into problems. I got to see how, she worked those solutions and just really build and manage those relationships. And so, a lot of what she taught me and then also started giving me to do, to the point where then I, was able to lead my own projects. But everything I know today, I really trace back to just her mentorship, her guidance, and the time she spent just training me.
A lot is made today of mentorship and mentoring. You hear a lot about it. When was your experience, you did you have to ask her, or was it just something you said she just took you under her wing, or was there a conversation about, hey, I'm going to teach you all this stuff, or did she just do it?
She just did it, and there wasn't any formality about it. And I've been fortunate to have a lot of people that I would consider mentors, and to me, it's just having a relationship and a comfort with somebody that if I have a problem or I need some advice, that I know that I can call them and just talk. And whether it was, that there were other people that took time teaching me the documents and what goes into a contract, depending upon what kind of contract it was, to the point of we were talking last time I was in Tulsa was Nancy Crenshaw's retirement. She, from a human resource and just a workforce management side, mentored me all throughout my career, whether it was hiring me, because she did hire me, to being an early supervisor and mentoring me through that. And the biggest thing I learned from her was taking care of people, but also holding people accountable, and there's a balance there too. And that was something that she would felt very strong about, and instilled in me as a young supervisor.
When you grew up professionally in the Corps, right? I guess that's probably, you started out as an intern and you spent what, 14 years or so, got all the way up to deputy chief of engineering and construction division, and that's a pretty high level position here. It's certainly a very important position here. But what have you? How have you seen things change in the Corps over the time you've been in? Like, I imagine when you started, there weren't as many female engineers, and now I'm assuming there's significantly more than there were when you started. You were probably one of the only ones that were in your area when you first started, right?
To, yeah, when I first started, there was one Mona Wagner. So I got to watch her and her management style and her leadership style. But I did move up pretty quickly, and it wasn't often, but every once in a while, when we were at an engineer, just a engineering offsite talking about just strategic stuff, I'd look around, and it would occur to me that man, I'm the only female here. But for the most part, for me, I didn't necessarily want to be known as, female engineer or selected because I was a female. I wanted to be there because I was credible, and they had confidence in me. But when I look, across, even just that middle management group, I do see a lot more diversity, and that's a good thing. And really, in order to continue moving that diversity up the chain, we've just got to keep that pipeline of solid qualified candidates that can continue to progress in their career. And from an engineering side, that target of diversity doesn't start when we hire somebody. It starts back in K through 6, and getting kids, excited about engineering. So, it all comes together, and it's a generational investment.
We had a conversation years back, and you told me that there was some people that came to visit your school. I think you said it was middle school, junior high, high school, and that was the first inkling you had about this engineering stuff. So, can you talk about the importance of doing those types of events in terms of STEM, of talking to young people about STEM or exposing them to STEM?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. It was a group of engineers from Pantex in Amarillo, Texas, that caused me to think maybe I want to be an engineer. My mom was a school teacher. My dad worked for the railroad. Nobody in my family was an engineer, so it was something that was new to me. And I don't know those people; they don't know me. But that hour of time that they spent in that high school sophomore chemistry class, just had an everlasting impact on my career and my life. And so, for me, it's important when I look back to give back, which is why some of that STEM is very important to me. Whether it's being a virtual judge on a science fair, Army e-cyber mission is going on right now. They also need virtual judges, even to the point of we have these local market days, and through the Lions Club over the weekend, I'll work and I get to donate my time. And they say, "Where do you want to donate your hours?" Well, it happens to be that the local high school here has a robotics program. So I donate my hours to give them access to grants. So little stuff like that, you just never know if you can make an impact on somebody that, you'll never know.
When you were in school, you were you a junior or senior when you had your first child?
Oh, in college,
Yeah.
I had one more year of school in college when Lincoln was born.
How did you balance that between being a young mother, and were you already an intern at that point for the Corps, or
No, I was a teaching assistant. So I had started in school, and I worked at a department store in the customer service department. So I know how to wrap gifts still to this day because of because of all that time. And then about my maybe it
I've
was
got a
my
video idea
junior
now. I've got a video idea. We're going to teach people
yeah,
how to wrap gifts. I'm
how to
sorry.
wrap
Go
gifts.
ahead.
I
Continue.
can make one heck of a bow.
I bet.
Yeah. So but then about my into my sophomore going into my junior year is when I had the chance to be a teaching assistant for a couple of classes there, at the school. So at that point I felt more like a traditional student, spent more time on the school campus. And so I was still a teaching assistant when my daughter was born. So if you look at, baby books, I've got, a 12-inch stack of papers that I've just graded in the background. And she was about, oh, 8 months old when I started with the Corps, and still had another semester of work. So, the good thing with the Corps is I could still work full time, get benefits, finish school, and just really have the chance to take care of my family. The balance, I don't know how I did it. I obviously had way more energy than I do today, but it just for me it took a village. Those professors that I was a teaching assistant for, they were very supportive, and then also so the Corps given me a chance. And before I went to work for the Corps, the only thing I knew about the Corps was the big brown signs that we drive by on the way to the boat ramp. So it opened my eyes to a lot of the different things the Corps of Engineers does that a lot of people just don't know about.
Were you working at a project office doing like resident office type work at the time as the intern? Were you assisting with that, or were you working out of the headquarters, out of the district headquarters?
A little bit of both. So once I finished my degree, I'd stayed in really it was really, let me think back, the environmental group is where I started. And so that's where I worked a lot of the time until I graduated. And then the benefits of the Corps with being an intern is you get to spend 3 to 4 months really rotating around and not just learning about what each of the different organizations within the Corps, what they do, but also getting to meet people. No, I was in the resident office, when my son was born. I still remember it was summer, and there was a lot of operation and maintenance projects at the district. They were like, "Oh, what are we going to do with her?" And I'm like, "You're not going to treat me any different. I want to be out, doing what you would have assigned me anyway." And I still remember walking next to the asphalt Jersey spreader, working those O&M projects. So good time, good experience.
What lake was that? What resident office were you at?
The Tulsa resident
Oh,
office.
okay. Okay.
Spent a lot of time at Afton Landing and Spanier Creek.
Uh, that internship. So you said that your mother was a teacher and your father worked for the railroad. Is that correct? Um,
Yes.
so you probably weren't exposed to a whole lot of construction sites, and being an engineering major, it's kind of, especially in civil works, right? It's kind of important to get some experience on those construction sites to see that world. It was that one of those benefits too in terms of professional development that the internship provided? Work that experience with an actual construction site or jobs. I'm not sure how they do it for engineering majors, but
Yeah, yeah. So it's typically a young engineer would rotate through a resident office, and the resident offices have a lot of engineers too within their office. Now, every intern needs the experience of showing up on a construction site in a brand new pair of steel toe boots, so they get made fun of. It's
oh,
a
it's
rite
like
of passage.
it's like showing up for those hash runs with the I ran this 5K shirt or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
um what advice so when what advice would you have for young people who are looking into engineering maybe, or who might want to consider engineering as a field?
It, if they're considering engineering, do the research. There's just a lot of different facets of engineering. When I started, I wanted to be an environmental engineer and save the world. And I'm working, contract acquisition strategies, which I love. And it just doesn't even feel like work. So it changes once you get more familiar. The mentorship we talked about, you start early building your network and having people that you can ask questions to, and that doesn't stop. People I went to school with, people I was an intern with, we've all had our careers and progressed into what we do today, but a lot of those are still my go-to people, my phone of friends, when I do need advice. And then you know whatever people have as far as an impact on, whether it's engineering or technology. I mean, we're building phenomenal geospatial information systems, GIS platforms that are outward facing on these public websites that are almost like a video game where we can, use that to help educate our stakeholders and the public as far as what we're doing. So it's not just engineering, it's technology and even the construction side. But just to give back, your time is precious, and what time people can give back to, that K through 6 or that high school generation that may not through their family be exposed, and you give them that exposure, and you never know what impact you may have that you just don't know about.
As an engineer, what is the majority of your day? You kind of hinted at the thing you're doing with contract acquisition and those areas, but I think you said before when we spoke that you probably spend more time doing addition than you do high level math. What type of what is a day like for you in your job?
So so yeah, I used to when talking to making trips out to the schools and joking with the kids, I'd ask them, hey, what kind of math do you think I do, day in and day out? And they would say, oh, calculus. And anyway, so yeah, addition and subtraction is it. So a lot of it is, um, just taking a look at the policies, challenging them, developing strategies, working with industry, getting their feedback. Last week, I was at a market research fair in San Antonio. The last couple of days, I was down in Galveston on a couple of day industry day there, just really talking about what we're doing, some changes we're thinking about. We want your feedback. But just again, they traces back to some of the insight I gained in private industry, letting them see a little bit behind the curtain, letting them know what we know, and then also this market volatility. How we change our strategies that continue to make businesses want to go after these core opportunities, and just working with the teams and making it not so overwhelming. If they want to consider it, then it's helping them with, here's what you got to do, here's some consideration, to where it's just like, nope, we're just going to do what we've always done. It's easier. So that's what a typical day is in my world.
Thank you for joining us for Corpstruction. Corpstruction is a production of the Tulsa District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Public Affairs Office. This episode of Corpstruction was brought to you by Southwestern Division Engineering and Construction. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.